Dobar dan, Jono Pot kívánok. I'm not like our friend Peter Čurčić from Újvidék, so experienced in Hungarian, but I can, start with a couple of words and so on. But anyway, jokes aside, thank you all very much for being with us. I know that there are 10 people at least at Zoom. Unfortunately, some people are sick, as we were just exchanging our health bulletin. So it seems that the same virus is being, working in Hungary and in Serbia nowadays. And that's why some people are absent, some people will be through Zoom. But anyway, we have a nice audience here, and I'm really happy that I can present you our colleague and friend from Hungary, Mr. Gergely Szilvay, or George internationally, if I could say, or whom I had the chance to meet like 6 years ago, I think so, at some of Vandenbroek meetings. He's most known as a journalist. I have precisely to say it's Mandiner magazine, which is one of the leading magazines in Hungary. But he's also, beside being journalist, in a way I can say public figure and a scientist who defended his PhD in 2016 at Catholic Pázmány University. In the meantime, he published that book as well, but I think 5 more. And last time we met in March, I think this year in Budapest after several years. And there was a CPAC meeting happening there with a lot of interesting people. And Gergely told me, I should give you my new book, actually. And so I really got lucky to get this copy with myself. And I know him as a very serious person. I also had the chance to be interviewed by Gergely 4 or 5 years ago, I think so. But I was very shocked pleasantly with the quality and the quantity of the stuff he put inside the book, because the book that I'm holding here and which we're going to present today is called A Critique of Gender Theory. And it's not only fantastically designed, but it's really something like a Baedeker, or I could say an encyclopedia of, I will be very precise, of the madness which we are facing nowadays. And it's really becoming a madness. All this that's going on with so-called gender theories and sexualization of the culture that is going on with so many things he will be presenting today, including polyamoria, for example, which is the big trend now, very fancy. It's becoming now, if you want to be ahead of your time and progressive, you have to live in the open relationship. That's really news I hear from people from Germany and so on. It's not allowable anymore to live in a decent traditional marriage that already says that you are conservative, transphobic, genderphobic, and blah, 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 everything. So you have to open for all the news that are going around. So in a way, he really made fantastic work. This book is published in English, but I have just briefly, before I give the floor, to mention a couple of words on the institution that published that. It's called in English Center for Fundamental Rights, or in Hungarian Alap Jogo Kezdpont. And it's good, it sounds, which is really a very, very important and enthusiastic institution led by Mr. Miklos Santo Miklos, and which is in a way a counterpart of Ordo Juris, which is also doing fantastic work in Poland. And both of institutions have been established as a sound way of really defending traditional Christian rights against of this kind of very anti-Christian, anti-human approach to the future and so on. So I'm really grateful to people from Center for Fundamental Rights 2 weeks ago, we had the chance to host Naji Denesh, who is now in charge within the institution for Balkans and who will be visiting us. They also accepted to cooperate with us on several future projects, including one conference on Istanbul Convention that we plan for June next year. So I'm really grateful for them that we will be working on many things in the future. But for today, we chose this really very, very substantial and important work that Gergely prepared for us. So without further ado, I would thank him for coming with us. And just to announce that tomorrow at the same time at room 105 at the 3rd floor, we will be having smaller seminar, or let me say Chatham House debate about the challenges for these kind of issues and the family which are standing ahead of us. Just to remind you about the Serbian perspective, the biggest issue that we are having nowadays is, of course, so-called law on gender equality that was passed in May, I forgot, 2021, and which is really fundamentalist law that is trying to change our perspective on language, on family, on many things. And it is supposed to start to be implemented and in full capacity from May next year, which will include even sanctions for those people who are not using so-called gender-sensitive language, including for us that are dealing with the sciences and so on. So there are a lot of very eminent problems that we might be facing in the future. And as we all know already for 30 months, this law is in front of waiting for the judgment of the Constitutional Court, and we are fighting to hopefully to see that being turned down. Anyway, without further ado, thank you very much for coming with us. Thanks to everybody. Some very prominent persons are here with us dealing with these issues, and I'm glad that I can also greet Bishop or Vladika, if I could say in our Orthodox tradition, Jakov, who is coming from North Macedonia and who is very much involved in fighting with some people we had the chance to meet. I'm very glad that some very strong pro-life and pro-family organizations are working in Macedonia. Just to mention another issue, one of the things they are tackling is idea of what was that law on identities, of different identities, gender identities, I don't know what's that precisely, because we also had an announcement by the Ministry of the Human Rights already. There was an idea by Minister Žigmanov that we should be having another phase, and this is so-called law on gender identities, which would include, beside male and female as a gender identity, another what's that, 100 or maybe smaller amounts. So we are all facing the same problem everywhere around, and we'll see what's happening in Hungary as well. So Gergely, please, the floor is yours.
Dobar dan. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a big pleasure, and it's to come to a so prestigious institution, and this is the first presentation of the book abroad. So I am very pleased to do it in Central Europe, which I especially carrying off that the Central European cooperation is I guess it's very important besides cooperating with American conservatives and other Western veterans. And I remember that when I spent my Erasmus time in Krakow many years ago, we were asked with a Serbian student to present to the Westerners the Central European situation. So I already cooperated with some Serbians. It was a great pleasure. What you have to about me is that Miša introduced me very well. My PhD was the critique of same-sex marriage. That's the topic comes from here, and it was first not my idea, but it was András Lánci, who big Hungarian think tank leader was he. So he led the big Hungarian think tank in those days, but he was also a professor at university, and he gave lectures in feminism, something like this, from a conservative perspective, and he asked for this kind of books, and I gave him some American books, and he said that okay, we need a Hungarian one with for Hungarian people, and how those books and my PhD on same-sex marriage was born as a critique of same-sex marriage, and this is the kind of continuation of that book, or exploration of other topics from about gender theory besides same-sex marriage. Although I included in the English edition a short evaluation of same-sex marriage too. But why I decided to publish or to write this book, it was really my own idea. It was like in the last years. It was in Hungarian published 2 years ago or 3, 2002, 2012, and in the Hungarian public life, many gender issues came out after the American courts decided that same-sex marriage should be accepted everywhere in America, and that was it was 2050, and immediately after that, the polyamory and transgenderism became issues. It was a deliberate decision of the movement. It can be proved. So I am not telling conspiracy theories, but if you read the newspapers back then, they decided some days later, they wrote articles about that. Okay, the next should be polyamory and transgender stuff, and because the Hungarian government is very family friendly, and also decided not to introduce same-sex marriage at Hungary, although civic partnership is an option, but there is no same-sex marriage, there is no legal adoption, and also the Hungarian government decided that on the IDs everybody should hold his biological identity, his biological sex should be shown. So there is no gender identity possibility in IDs at Hungary, although has never been. So, but it was rejected, and also the possibility of changing your sex by medical work. It's suspended at Hungary. In theory, it was like for a few years ago that you had to apply individually for the medical treatment, and the committee of psychologists and psychiatrists decided if you are really on a situation that it's worth to do. And this is the law still today, the official law, but there is a government decision to suspend it. So they don't issue any kind of permissions today, although they didn't change formally the law. That's the situation. And of course, LGBT movement does not like this kind of things. But on the other hand, we don't have immigration and something else which would threaten the life of LGBTQ people. So their basic rights, I guess, are really respected. And then they are able to publish books. 4 years ago, there was a big debate about the book. It was a fairy tale country for everybody. And it collected, it's translated in English already, newly written fairy tales, so they are not fairy tales because they are written by individuals from an LGBTQ perspective, and it was a big debate, and that's why I included the book a treatise on fairy tales, if there can be LGBTQ fairy tales, because they cannot be. But that's the context. And the other perspective why I wrote this book is that many people at Hungary ask that, or think even on the conservative side, that gender issues are not real issues at Hungary, and in the West they are just extreme isolated cases, and we shouldn't deal with it, or just the government just brings gender issues into the public square to divide people and to conquer with a non-existent problem the opposition, something like this kind of thing. And I was really appealed by this kind of arguments, and I try to show people that there is systematic risk from the West. And the third aspect was that I met the problem that my conservative veterans weren't able to argue really good on a good level. They said that, okay, tradition says otherwise, or you should laugh of them, or something like this. And I said, no, we need a sound philosophical argument, and this argument will be anthropological argument. So that's the context of the book, and yeah, if but the book does not really deal with actual politics. It's of course there are examples from actualities, but it's basically a theoretical treatment on the issue to found the conservative case for that against gender issues. This is the Hungarian edition. If which this one. Here are the maybe can I.
No, you have to be here because
Here, okay.
Okay, but you can maybe see it there.
See that, okay.
Okay. Your turn. Whatever.
So here are the structure of the book, the chapters. I begin with the feminist theories, the second wave of feminism, which I think anthropologically founded the gender theory. And after that, I go through some topics on that line: patriarchy, heteronormativity, Me Too, gender mainstreaming, contemporary feminism, even postmodern universities, gender theory on the international level. This is the only one place when I deal with some serious actualities, for example, with the Istanbul Convention. You have to know that the Istanbul Convention was rejected by the Hungarian parliament, and the then Minister of Justice, Judit Varga, issued for us at the newspaper, but for others too, publicly a table which listed those kind of Hungarian laws which deals with the topics which were included in the convention. Therefore, she said that which is important we already dealt with, and the other side of the convention is not for us. We don't agree with the philosophical fundamentals of the convention, and everything else is actually dealt in the Hungarian laws and enforcement. So something like this. No. Like this. Okay. What is this doing? That's it. After that, I stepped to the gay issues. Like I proved that they are not born that way. Actually, there is no any kind of scientific agreement on that lesbianism and homosexuality is born that way. There are some evaluations that say that maybe there are some biological factors, but the whole issue is very complex, and nobody was able to demonstrate that it's inborn until that topic. And it's very interesting that that the Western opinion among people is that everybody's born that way, and they think that science just established this claim, which it really did not. So, and most of I collect those scientists who deal with the topic. Most of them are gay. That's why they were interested in, and they state out that okay, I didn't find anything conclusive. And I guess maybe there is something biological factor, but we don't really say anything sure. Something like this. All of them say this, even until today. So it's like this is the main. This is one of the main arguments. You know, they try to. Why they say that is born that way? Because they want to withdraw it from the from the area of ethical considerations. But it's not true, because I mean it's a false argument, because if something is inborn, it even can be subject of ethical considerations. Let's say aggressivism, something like this. Second, if you withdraw more and more things from ethical considerations because you say it's inborn, you undermine the freedom of human agency. So our age is try to establish freedom as the basic of the sole basic, unfortunately, of Hungarian of the sole basic ethical element of the Hungary of human beings. And the only one basic for being human, and they try to do on the way that they don't want to consider anything ethically, and they say that every aspect of human beings is inborn. I don't know, cheating on your girlfriend or your wife. They try to find genes that. They can find that it's inborn, which means you don't have freedom. So they abolish freedom and they try to create a deterministic biological theory to establish freedom when they just do the opposite.
But everything is construction.
Yeah, on the other way, and I will spoke about that. So the other side is that if it's not inborn, they still can argue for their case. So they shouldn't be very much about that if it's inborn or not. I mean the LGBTQ movement. Although in this case they of course have to argue, and they wanted just not to argue about that. And one of the big problems of the whole LGBTQ movement is that. On one side, they argue that everything is inborn. On the other side, they argue that everything is a social construct, which is two different arguments. On a more abstract level, you can reconcile them, that what is inborn, what is not, what is construction. But basically, the two lines of argument are in opposition to each other. And of course they employ every time what they need from the two. And later I pass on to LGBT folktales. Political correctness, biological sex is reinforced. I treat the nature or nurture debate, and afterward I bring in some Thomist now realistic conceptions about the whole problem. Yeah. So I give some examples that why the topic is important. There is a Canadian father whose daughter was whose daughter said that she is exactly he, and the father was fighting for the daughters.
I think if you move here so you can see that.
Please, thank you.
Just move it a little bit.
And
He
was almost imprisoned. There is a Strasbourg decision back in many years about the Finnish case, which the Strasbourg says that it's the competence of member states, but a guy in Finland wanted to. He realized, let's say, that he's a woman, and he wanted to show it in his ID. But the Finnish officials said that there is no same-sex marriage in Finland. There was not. There is now. So he cannot show it on the ID, or if he wanted to show there, he should separate from his wife. But he said he does not want to separate from his wife because of religious commitments, which is so a little bit interesting, let's say. But that was the argument, and he went up to Strasbourg, and Strasbourg sent it back to the member states level. I don't know if the court would do it today, but that's just some interesting cases that why it's important. Also, there is the transgender epidemic in America. The number of transgender adolescents just rise many levels up from the beginning. So it's like more than, it's not just doubled. It's like 4,000 percentage. It growed something like this. So from very small to bigger one. And in America, the doctors and the psychologists usually send you immediately to a medical treatment. They don't send you back to the psychologist if you're adolescent. And more people just say that, okay, so more and more people later just regret the decision. And that's why the category of dead transitioners came into existence. And the LGBTQ movement really does not like dead transitioners because their existence basically undermines their basic claims. Or there is this book, Schools in Transition, which says to Americans that American schools that how they should treat so-called transgender youth in the schools from 4 years. So it's like for just small children. It was put together with LGBT organizations and teachers' unions. In America, they say that if there is a class, so they go somewhere to the weekend, for example, and the class sleeps there. If somebody who is a boy and feels to be a girl, he should be seated in the girls' room. And if some girls don't agree, those girls should be removed, not the boy. And this is true for, I don't know, toilet and everything else. They say that. So when, for example, at Hungary, many people argue that, oh, there is no this kind of things for children, just for grown people. It's not true. And I find some reports on City Journal. It's an American urban magazine, a scientific magazine, and the Reuters just found that there were more than 53 maybe young people went under medical treatment in the last years, and those are just they were able to find, and whose treatment was covered by some social security monies. So this is like it. So what is gender theory? It's basically a feminist anthropology based on postmodern theories. So it's basically like Derrida and Foucault and others. So deconstruction, post-structuralism. I'm not able to pronounce it in English, but not in Hungarian. Those are the basic things. And there is another line which based on, of course, Enlightenment values and Kant and others. But the anthropology is, I guess, is basically postmodern, and what I found that they radically separate body and soul. So I wouldn't approach the LGBTQ and feminist question from its use about sexuality, or I do not approach it from the point of sexuality or the aspect of sexuality, because it's a consequence of what they think about sexuality and intimacy and sexes and that kind of things. The basic thing is an anthropological revolution that they separate body and soul very radically, although they don't admit it. They complained for me that we don't want to separate them, and I said, okay, but it's a logical force that if you say what you say, you are separated them. And the main sentence is from Simone de Beauvoir, maybe you know, The Second Sex, who says that the woman wasn't born a woman. He was made by history and other things to be a woman, which is the basic stuff for this kind of anthropology. These are the founding mothers, let's say, Kate Millett and others. And this is the basic works for this feminist second wave feminism. And I think gender theory is basically identical with second wave feminism, and we should say that gender theory is the anthropology of feminism. And here is a bigger quote from the Routledge Companion to Critical Theory, and it's from the chapter on gender and queer theory. I used to quote it for feminists who deny that they deny naturality or something else. It's like it says that for most feminist theorists, this means a complete repudiation of any reference to natural or essential qualities of womanhood or femininity. So maybe they say they don't want to ignore naturality, but they do. Ignore, maybe there are different levels, but they ignore it. Which means that they basically oppose the classic view on the purpose of people and purpose of everything, like Christian theology, Thomism, and even the ancient Greeks, Aristotle and others hold on that there is a natural rights or natural law, which means not your natural impulses, but that you are constructed towards something as a purpose. Yes?
We can't hear you. You have to take. Can you wait afterwards with a question?
Okay, wait.
Okay, let's. Or if it's so immediate.
No, it's interesting because of this the argument raised here. So should I speak now or later?
Or if it's urgent.
No, it's not urgent.
Okay, then wait. Let's.
Thank you. But I am curious about your questions and the situation in Serbia and everything else. So my answer to the problem is that it's about this that body is so intertwined, and I use Aristotle, Aquinas, and modern science to prove it from a philosophical perspective. So I use some philosophical language in the first chapters, which many of my readers took it hard. But I think it's important to understand the question in a deep way and not just on the superficially. So, and I say there is a purpose for our existence, and even the book is a secular argument, although based also on Christian thinkers. I do say that there is a purpose for our existence, and I used to say for my critics everyday examples of, if you buy, for example, a washing machine, there is a description how to use it, and if you use it another way, it's not an alternative usage or an alternative washing machine, but you use it the wrong way and it will break. Or if you buy it and it's not works, it's not an alternative washing machine, but it has some kind of problems from the factory. So it will come out later too, why I say that. But my basic approach is an Augustinian Thomist approach, let's say. I find it, I guess it's a good decision for that. Okay, let's go back there. Why I said this example about the washing machine, because especially the transgender movement argues from a deconstructivist point of view that there is no purpose and no naturality, and there is no duality of sexes inborn. And one of them argues there is a deaf feminist activist who I quote in the book. She says that she found a partner who is half deaf, and they wanted children, and they managed it. They had children from she had children from a half deaf a man, and the children are deaf too. And it was her deliberate purpose to have deaf children, and she says that deafness is just an alternative cultural way of life, something like this. You know, like new postmodern theories about ableness and others. They say that it's not a medical problem; they are just medicalized, something like this. And it's a clever argument for somebody who is not involved in philosophical debates. So you can gaslight people who don't think about that, because for them everything is just normal and given. But you can gaslight them, and that's why you have to show that although it's a clever argument, it's not true, because I have glasses, and it's not means that I have an alternative eyes, but that I have wrong eyes, something like this. So if you misuse if you're inborn with I don't know, you're intersex and you have some problems, it does not mean that there is a third sex which can be born on a normative way. So you have to clever show them that problems, if they are inborn, it does not mean that those are alternative sexes beside women and men, something like this. Although they won't like your argument, but there's a possibility to argue on our side about these topics. And on gender and nature, I basically used two books. This one and this one. This is a newer one. This is an old one. Both guys, Chasmore is a well-known libertarian guy. On this kind of things, he's a conservative. On economic things, he's a libertarian. But this book is very good, and although it's just partly about gender things, and it treats just the nature-nurture debate, not LGBTQ issues. This one is also on that topic. Is just on the nature and nurture debate from the early 90s or in the 20s. I don't know exactly. Don't remember. And the nature-nurture debate is about how womanhood and manhood is a construction, or the sex roles, what they say gender, what they call gender, how they socially instructed or not. And usually there is a debate about the percentages. You know, that, okay, maybe it's this percentage nature, this percentage nurture. What gender, nature, and nurture shows, is a prominent psychologist in California, is that he carefully examines every aspect of the debate. But at the end, he says, and I agree with them, and I quote him in my book, that basically the two things and two traits are so intertwined that you cannot separate them. In some cases, they multiply each other. In some cases, they nullify each other. So it does not make sense to separate the two things. So the whole debate on percentages is just simply not really useful. I would say that it's 100% nature and 100% nurture too, something like this. So it does not make sense. He uses many examples about that. So I guess simply we can say that this debate is baseless. Although I show that the feminists really ignore the nature side today. And what is interesting that the guy who wrote this book he was really on the feminist side, but he later went more moderate, let's say. So this is the feminist stuff. Alfred Kinsey is important. Maybe you heard about them because he first used the idea of scale. Although his work is ethically problematic, he involved very small children and measured their so-called orgasms, something like this, which is completely nonsense. And the scale what the LGBTQ movement uses today is, I think, goes back to the ideas of Kinsey. Also, some practical aspects. The USA percentages of LGBTQ people. What is interesting is that the trans it's few years old, so it's bigger now a little bit. Of course, in the youngest cohort is much more bigger. There is an interesting phenomenon that at the universities the quarter of the students call themselves LGBTQ, so it's 25%. But if you ask them about, it's not here, this data is not shown in the PPT, but if you ask them about their, let's say, sexual practices or something, or their inclinations, it will turn out they are totally heterosexual. So it's some kind of ideological, they want to show that they are in solidarity with the LGBTQ. That's why they show that they are LGBTQ, but they are not, which is very interesting. Maybe we can step aside this one. He's one of the first, Simon Levey, one of the first gay scholar of the theory about inbornness of homosexuality, and he said that he didn't find so much. He finds something in the brain, but he stated out that he didn't find a biological cause for that. What is more interesting is after the ball, because the LGBTQ movement many times eager to stress that there is no coordinated propaganda, or let's say communication, if we do not want to use propaganda. It's a loaded expression, although I think we can use, but okay, let's not use propaganda. Let's say there is a coordinated communication of the LGBTQ movement. They deny it, but if you read this book, After the Ball, from the 80s from America, it's a recommendation that how they should communicate. And basically it says that we have to drop to people every day some news about gay people and everything else, so they will be vet about. So there is an information propaganda. Also, I collect what they say in this book, but it's a very big proof that there is conscious, coordinated communication of them.
We have some sociologists here that written about that, like
Wow.
Slobodan Antonić and so on, but very deeply.
Tell me more about that later. It's
We have some researchers.
because I know that book, but we need more research to prove that it in the practice it still works. Transgenderism is a problem, as I saw in America, especially. I Am Jazz is a series in America about a young girl who became he's a boy, but he became a girl, let's say, and he seemed to be totally a girl, although he's biologically a boy who goes through now medical treatment. And there is a book about her or him. There is a series in the TV, and it's very popular in America, very misleading. So that kind of things influence the American youth, unfortunately. Also, there is Walt Heyer. He's an old transgender guy. He was transgender. He became Christian, and he regretted everything. why it's important, why I included him in the book is that he felt to be a woman, a girl, for decades, and he was in a good position in companies and everything else, and finally he went for hormone treatment, but also he started to study psychology at university, and he went for a psychological treatment. And during this treatment and during hormone treatment, he found out that he's not woman. He didn't felt anymore to be a woman, and it was the last time to. He was a little bit. What to say? So it was in the early step in the hormone treatment. He was lucky. He was able to step back, although he seemed to be a grandmother, not a grandfather, a little bit, or in between. And he became Christian, and he wrote many books about the topic, including there is one book of him which includes letters from people who approached him, and he saved from this kind of treatments. So he's a living example that even if you have gender identity problems for even decades, it can be changed, or it can change suddenly, and it's never sure that. So if you go to a treatment, medical treatment, gender assessment treatment, there is no sure way to show that you won't regret it. Simply just there is no this kind of things. I included some kind of scientific treatment of that topic, but there is not so much. So it's under-researched, the topic. This is the biggest problem, but you cannot research it because there are not so much transgender people who live through decades, so there is no scale to treat the problem. There is one Finnish study which says that for some years after medical treatment or gender assessment surgery, they are okay. After that, everything is coming back, every psychological problem. So it just does not solve their problems. What is more, if they regret the treatment, it cannot be done back. Because if you are treated with hormones, it's not like that, okay, let's guess boys' hormones, I will become a boy. Okay, now I guess that girls' hormones, it's not works on that way. So if you go through medical treatment and you regret it, you will be really trapped in the wrong body. What it was your original claim, and it cannot be redone. So that's why what here is important. Other question is intersexuality, which the transgender movement uses as a tool, as political tool, to say that there are third sex or many other sex. So the dualistic approach is not true, and everything else. There are more problems with this. That first, most of the transgender people are not intersexual. Second is that they manipulate the numbers of intersexuals on a way that they include many kind of medical problems or disorders, which are really different, and most of them are not. So most of them has some made some difficulty to the person, but most of them does not make impossible to identify what sex the person has. So maybe you are not so boyish as you should be because of Klinefelter syndrome or Turner syndrome, but you are definitely a boy or a girl, even if you have this kind of syndrome. Even there are some problems, and there are just a few of these disorders which really makes it impossible to identify your sex, or really don't have one. But it does not mean that it's normal because of what I said. We have a purpose, and there's a normal way of working of the body, and that's the second point when the traditional philosophical claims about the purpose of people is important, because some transgender theorist says that conservatives get it on the wrong way because they say that that there are just sexes which are born that way. But when I say that there is other situations inborn in you, for example, this kind of disorders, they say that they are disorders, and the conservatives should decide if it's biology which decides or not, and what this kind of analysts or theorists don't get in, they don't consider, is that it's not just the biology, but that defines your sex. There is we know from history and from our experience that how a body and anything else, let's say a washing machine, works on a good way. So there is normative way of working, and they don't want to consider this kind of aspects. And that's why we can say that there are some inborn disorders, and it's not just simply biological facts which are important or situations, but really there is normative way, and it's not and it does not nullificate the original argument of conservatives. Maybe if you're Darwinists, it is, I don't know, but the biggest part what they don't consider and they don't know is that kind of the philosophy of purposeness and the natural aloneness of things. So intersexuals are used to be a political tool for the transgender movement, and they really overestimate their numbers. At Hungary, there was a debate about that, and they said, okay, at least 10,000 people should be intersex at Hungary. And I went to medical and the doctors to say what they know. They said there are no official statistics because they don't read it. But I went through some international studies, and I found that it's actually if you compare to this, so to the global or the international studies, we compare the Hungarian one, it should not be more than 1,800. So it's a big difference, I guess. And most of them does have identifiable biological sex. Polyamory. I didn't include here polyamory. I have a chapter on this in the book. Basically, their argument is that polyamory is like being more conscious about your feelings. You have to deal with your feelings that you are cheated on. You have to be more open and more adult. More, I don't know, this kind of things, which is, it's one thing that it's immoral from a Christian point of view, that from the other side, they make arguments which can be compared to the arguments that, okay, you have to deal with if you feel that you want to cheat on your wife or, I don't know, girlfriend, somebody else, you have to deal with this kind of problem, and you have to, so they situate themselves above everything else because they are superior in dealing with their feelings if there is somebody else in the relationship, and they demonstrate it as a kind of superior self-restraint or self-treatment, but they don't see that exactly this superior self-treatment you need in a traditional partnership too. Just on another way. So it does not make sense what they say, basically. Maybe it's more interesting if different family models are equal. My basic question is equal on what? They have never said, but my guess is that they mean mental, that people involved in the family model mentally equally good. But it's just a guess of mine, especially children. But it's not. There are many studies from America. Sociologists wanted to demonstrate that one parent families, separated people's families are equal with the traditional one, but they weren't able to demonstrate it. It's failed. Also, there are many studies about that men and women treat their children differently. So it's inborn biologically, partly at least. So men cannot be a mother, and women cannot be a father naturally. And of course, the children need both kind of treatment from their parents. It's very interesting that how the same-sex, how the argument for the same-sex families developed. The first studies in the 80s said that okay, it's not so good as the traditional families. After that, in the 90s, there were some new studies which said it's equal. After that, there came some studies which said it's superior to traditional families because of, I don't know, emotional aspects, something like this. The same-sex parents can give more on an emotional way to their children, and all of the problem originate just in social discrimination and in social problems. And there came Mark Negnerus 10 years ago, a Texas professor who in those times just became a Catholic from Calvinist, and demonstrated on the biggest ever done study that there are 40 different problems with the children of same-sex couples. Those problems, these are not so big usually, but they nevertheless exist. And there was a political campaign against Mark Negnerus because of that study. But there was another guy who demonstrated in the same issue of this journal that all of other studies which are cited on the side of same-sex couples and same-sex families by the American Psychological Association were methodologically very problematic. So when somebody appeals to the APA as an authority on the issue, it's really worth to see what the APA cites, because all of them, all of the studies were very on a little scale. They used the snowball methodology, which is, thank you very much. They asked the parents, and of course, if you ask same-sex parents in a study, they know the political consequences and they will question the right answers, let's say, what they want. Instead of them, Mark Negnerus asked the youth who at least 1 year were grown up by same-sex parents, not the parents. So these kind of things. Of course, the topic is not closed. It's a very politicized topic. Mark Negnerus acknowledges that there are some methodological problems with the study, or not methodological problems. Basically, it's so complex empirically and epistemologically that you really cannot differentiate every kind of problem because they multiply. And basically, if you are children adopted by a same-sex couple, first you have, when you arrive, a separation trauma, let's say, because you were separated. Usually your parents separated, because most of the same-sex couples, if they have children, it's the children of one of them biologically. Now it changes, but basically it was the case. So they have a separation trauma first, and that's the door, and after that it multiplies. And I can recommend Karl Zimmermann's book Family and Civilization, which I summarize in the book, in which he gives you how a cycle of a civilization can be shown on what kind of family models are the dominating one in a given civilization or culture. And he says, in comparison with the Roman empires and then the Greek civilization ends, that when many types of family forms which are less devoted to each other than the traditional one comes into play, it it shows a civilizational decline. It not causes it, basically, or we don't know if it causes it, but it's a show of it. So that's his argument. Also, I many times get the question that why I call gender theory an ideology, because it's I don't know, it's not an ideology. It's a bad word. It's a negative word, something like this. And that's why I read the question in the book. My basic argument, based on Michael Frieden's books, which I saw that he was here for lectures. The basic question is, what is an ideology? Michael Frieden says that he has a descriptive definition of ideology, which is not positive, not negative in his works. He says that if you make sense of the word, you understand the word somehow, it's an ideology. So and after that he treats political ideologies, and he treats feminism as a kind of thin ideology. So one case ideology, and from that point of view, it is an ideology because it's a structured thinking about the word. But if I use the conservative definition of ideology, which means it's a worldly eschatology to make the heaven in the world, material and other ways. I can argue that feminism is an ideology from that point of view because it tries to create a perfect world, which is not possible. And if in the beginning I refer to gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming is the practical political application of gender theory. I use these two Hungarian books, which was written for the socialist government because before 2010 by feminists. Some of them I know very well, and it's a treatment about how the government should apply gender theory in politics. They every time said me that, we do not want to change society, just a small changes. But in the first sentences, there is written down that we do not need just superficial stuff. We have to change the society at the core, at the family, and everything. They explicitly express that they should change the man-woman relationship to everything, and they explicitly express that superficial changes are not okay, because there are some superficial changes which even conservatives and feminists would agree. I don't know partial work stuff and other which helps the mothers and other things. So from that point of view, I guess gender theory it's an ideology. Folk tales. This is the book. Fairy tales for everybody. As I said, my basic argument is that folk tales are folk tales, not written by individual people. And if you change and they are a reflection of a traditional agrarian society. If you change in the dynamic anything, basic stuff, the whole cosmos of fairy tales collapse. So if you say that there are two princes, there will be no fight because there is no fight. So the whole script collapses on the beginning if you change these kind of things in a fairy tale. And I say very tolerantly that of course you can write LGBTQ tales, just don't call them fairy tales because they are not fairy tales. Maybe you can say that you get some inspiration from fairy tales, but don't call it fairy tales because they are not. And of course, I cannot stop them to write them, but at least I have some recommendations. Also, I have a chapter on political correctness because the feminists deny there are political correctness. Based on that book, and I say that there is political correctness. We know that it comes from Mao's line of the party, and why there is political correctness? Because the postmodern theory says that language creates reality, or language does not, or so there are different schools. Language creates reality. We don't know reality at all. Language distorts reality, or language denies us the access to reality. This kind of postmodern theories exist. Judith Butler and others, and because they think that the reality is created by language in our mind. They think if we change language, the reality and our attitude will change in our mind. And one of the most recent example is that they wanted medically treated transgenders vagina to call it a front hall, because it's not a real vagina, and they say it's more inclusive if you call it front hall. And people maybe will think more tolerant way if we use this word. So we don't start from reality, from materiality, but we start from the language. It's typically postmodern. I think there is some kind of merit in it. So yeah, but it's this one. I spoke about these kind of things. There are some studies I use to show that biological sexes are matter, and they are those sexes, and there are no more. One of the unusual allies in this lesbian feminist who wrote The Material Girls, and she was excluded by the transgender movement for that. She argues that biological sexes are.
She lost her job.
Yeah. And about the unit of body and soul are used, for example, Roger Scruton's arguments and others. And at the end of the book, there is a short statement of how we came here, because one of the most asked questions for me that, okay, but how this came here, how this whole thing came up and from where it originated, which is very hard to, you can go back to Adam and Eve, but this book by a Calvinist scholar from America, it's really useful. It's for that to make some sense how we came here. And that's the end of my presentation. Goes deep to the basic anthropological differences between the traditional view I appreciate and the postmodern view that the gender theory uses. This is Jean-Paul Sartre, who was not the who was the partner of Simone de Beauvoir. So
Significant other.
yeah, and he said that man cannot be defined. There is no human nature, and there is a conservative. There was conservative Cardinal Ottaviani in the 60s who said "Semper idem." It was his title sentence, which means always the same. Although he did not refer to anthropological aspects, but they're from the same age, and their difference is I guess shows very well what is deep inside the whole gender stuff. So thank you for your to being present, and of course every kind of questions I am open to, and considerations also, not just questions, but a discussion and everything else.
Yes. Kürzener.
Voilà.
Thank you very much. And of course, we will continue. But I just have, before I start, actually, I think it's, since I think still don't have LGBT fairy tales here. We are
Lucky.
not yet. Yeah, we are still conservative. So we are, a lot backward concerning the recent development. And this is really fantastic. I mean, the book is really absolutely amazing in the sense of having that as an encyclopedia of the things we are facing nowadays. I'm really strongly recommending it. This is really one of the most cutest, if I could say, the most interesting, but really the most dangerous parts of chapter 16 dealing with LGBTQ folk tales. So actually, author is speaking about the intention to rewrite all the traditional folk tales in order to be presented to the kids in how should I say, concerning to the contemporary fashion or whatsoever. So he's giving the whole as a propaganda tool, how long it should be, how defined, and it's really huge entrepreneurship. So just to illustrate one example that he's giving from the book of Geoffrey Miles, a storybook called The Princess and the Treasure, which is also translated to Hungarian.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Not yet in Serbia, we are, as I told back, but I don't know why.
I don't think it sold well at Hungary, but it never was translated.
You know, so just to illustrate to people, you know, the story goes, in the kingdom of Evergreen live King Rufus and his daughter, Princess Elena. One day, Elena is kidnapped by an evil witch-like woman. A grieving Rufus proclaimed that the kingdom will go to the man who frees and marry his daughter. So the champion knight Gallant and the bookworm Ernest set out to rescue the princess. But during their short but dangerous adventure, they discovered that they don't need Elena. They are in love with each other. The tale ends with a happy ending. But Elena is also have nice things ahead of herself. The author states, Princess Elena discovered that she is a lesbian as well. She says in the book that she does not want to marry any prince. She is a princess who really doesn't need saving. And what about the protagonist? The character in the books are a combination of people I know and my friends, and each of my heroes has the personality traits of several of my friends. So actually, it's really the things that are standing and waiting in front of us, and unfortunately, I can even imagine very soon those things to be involved not only in the kindergarten as it's happening in the USA already. There is a bunch of those things, but also in the I don't know, primary school as regular textbooks that have to be studied and so on and so on. So, I mean, I just really wanted to illustrate how it looks, and I know there are a lot of people, and I think probably we will have something at Zoom and so on. So, since the mic is with Nikola, let's start with him, and after that I saw, of course, Mr. Jankovic, who is waiting already for some time to make the point. Please.
Okay. Thank you very much for the lecture. I think it's very important that we see books like this. I think it's very important that we discuss things like this. I come from a position fully believing... sorry? Oh, okay, sorry, you were coughing. I come from a position fully believing that gender theory is an ideology, and a very destructive one at that. However, in order for this not to be a complete panegyric, I have a few provocations that will illustrate some of the differences I think that we who believe that we are against gender theory might have. First of all, I was surprised that you did not talk about John Stoller and John Money, those sexologists who in fact probably originated the term gender and gender identity and their associated medical malpractice against children, because it was clearly linked. It clearly shows that not in feminism but in sexology directly related to the study of what was later termed transgenderism but was then called transsexuality is when these terms originated. They were later picked up by feminists, I think, quite unfortunately, because they wanted to make this distinction between what is sex and what is societally constructed. And I think it's very unfortunate that this gender, the word itself, which was borrowed from grammar actually, came into use because it allowed this detachment from sex completely, and it allowed for further problems down the line. Speaking of that, I'm very glad that you mentioned Kathleen Stock, and I think this illustrates that it's not in fact feminists universally who are to blame for this nonsense, because radical feminists today are among the most persecuted and cancelled in academia that you can imagine. So we can talk about J.K. Rowling, we can talk about Kathleen Stock, we can talk about Germaine Greer. These are women who fully identify as feminists and who argue on the basis of sex for female rights and for female for furtherment of female people, that is to say women, and they're brutally persecuted in today's academia, threatened, everything.
We shouldn't, forget, but some people don't follow that, but it's very important. Judith Butler gave the order, actually, with the manifest, saying that those people should be cancelled and
Yes.
de facto prosecuted.
Yes, and these are people. These are women who fully identify as feminists. I think this idea about the origins and metaphysics of homosexuality will probably also become a problem down the line. I come from a position believing that homosexuality is innate. That although it's right, there is no consensus on definite on definite prenatal causes, genetics. This is absolutely true. But I think some other examples will show that it is probably a good deal, but this is a more complex topic. I agree, and I would also like to point out that despite what some of us may want to believe, conservative opinion about what has been termed gender has been shown to be at times fully compatible with transgender ideology. That is to say, I will cite two examples. The Tavistock Clinic in the UK, which was closed due to serious doubts about medical malpractice. This was a so-called gender clinic where adolescents came with so-called gender problems and were immediately, almost immediately referred to hormones, surgery, etc. It was closed due to medical malpractice, and according to testimonies of those working there, there was a deep connection between the inner sense of hatred towards one's homosexuality and the belief at home that their parents would prefer to have a transgender straight child rather than a homosexual child who simply stays within their natal sex. Sex cannot be changed anyway. And if you're interested in more of this, you can Google, there is on YouTube a very instructive little documentary. I think the child is called Kai Shapley. This is an example of a child growing up in rural Texas, with this very what they call the Bible Belt, so deeply Christian perspective, deeply evangelical Protestant Christianity, I will say, perspective, where the mother gives a testimony and says that she is able to justify transing her son by saying, I believe that he has a female soul, this theological perspective, and that I was praying day and night, please let me not have a gay son, please let my son not be homosexual, anything else, because if he is, like, there's almost an insinuation that she would murder her gay son. And so this transgenderism allows an escape, and she can pretend that she has a normal straight daughter. And so I think these connections may prove problematic, but I think despite these provocations and these points of divergence, I think that it is very important that we keep discussing this, because this is a topic that rests on a defense of reality, a fundamental reality that we can have all of our debates only when we have established the terms. And one of the fundamental terms is the reality of biological sex, that there are only two sexes, and that this has also been, like, historically the point of justification for homosexual rights. There are only two sexes. Homosexuals are nowadays totally cancelled if they insist that they only like the same sex, etc., etc., etc. So thank you very much, and I hope that this anti-gender movement can also discuss its points of divergence, but we are defending, I think, the same thing here, and the fundamental reality.
Or later. Or the afterwards? No?
Please.
Okay.
People ask here, so.
Thank you very much for your comments. Actually, most of what you spoke about is mentioned in the book. So just I didn't put in the representation because it was still too much. But the John Money case and his usage of gender is included in the first chapters and also in the transgender chapters. About the homosexuality is innate or not, I don't have a final position as an outsider. I collected what we know now. I don't say there is no biological factor, but I said it's not deterministic, something like this. What most of the scholars now today, they are on that position as far as I understood. The feminist trans problematic, we see it at Hungary too, that the so-called TERF radical feminists come to us against transgender stuff. Even one of them is writing me many thanks, many things. So it's very interesting. I think the connection is here that the transgender movement uses the same anthropology as the feminists, just upside it down. So the feminists say, and that's where the differences originate. That the feminists say that your personality and your and the sex roles are social construction. The transgender says that almost your body is a social construction. Judith Butler says that biological sex is a social construction because it's a linguistic term, something like this. So it's the opposite, but how they separate body and soul is the same, I think. So it originates in the so the separation is the same, and that's why they have some kind of so feminists open the door for transgenderism from that point of view. Maybe it can be critiqued my point of view. It's not just my point of view. I have some other scholars, Roger Scruton and Ryan T. Anderson, who says that too. I don't say it cannot be attacked, but I guess the separation is has the same nature, although it's of course it's the opposite. What you said about the female soul or something, it's very interesting. I considered it also in the book, and I say that that of course feminists don't speak about soul because they don't believe in it. If your personality is a social construction, there is no soul. Except I read the problem of soul in one of the first chapter. So the problem is that we can use the soul as an expression for different things. Sometimes for our feelings, sometimes for our personality, and there is a theological usage, and it's very similar to the philosophical usage as a structure of as the metaphysical structure of body, which is not the same as personality. And of course the philosophers who I refer to, Kant and Aquinas and others, use it in the sense of the philosophical theological sense as a substance or something else, not a personality. But even though if you use it as an inborn personality, something like this, the feminists and the transgenders are different the way that the transgender says that the soul is inborn, and the feminists say the opposite, as I just presented. But the conservatives have a third position, because the transgender says that the soul is inborn on a way that it has a sex opposite to its body, and the conservatives says it's not true, or it cannot be true because it's logically not. So I think, of course, you can argue against conservatives maybe, but I think let's say conservative Christian position is the third one. So there is the feminist position, the transgender position, and let's say Christian position on that, and they differ about the soul also with the transgenders, about the nature of the soul. If they agree on the existence of the soul, it's good, but we say that the soul cannot have a different sex from the body. They say it can. So this is the difference. And what you saw about the homosexuality and trans question is, it's as far as I see, the LGBT and LGB and the TQ is some kind of different movements inside, and even the British Stonewall just sued another charity organization in England. Yes, and the first time that LGBT organization wants to withdraw in a trial, another LGBT organization takes them as status because LGBT, because the other is, let's say, anti-transgender. So it's like internal debate. but most of the things you said, I guess I deal with in the book. The Kaisa case is not included because it was published before it. Maybe you won't agree on everything in the book, but the topics are dealt somehow, I guess. Thank you very much for your comments. This was very important.
Yes, thank you.
Microphone, yes.
posebnu odgovornost za održavanje ovog regiona visoko na političkoj agendi Evropske unije. Kada je
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, now it's okay. Thank you. Well, it is quite clear that here we're dealing with growing insanity, and there is no dialogue here except on the public scene, and because it's propedeutic and pedagogic, and this way by publishing books and doing research on it. Why I'm saying there is no dialogue? Because for a dialogue there is a need that people who are engaged in dialogue want to hear each other. And generally the conferences or public appearances of those promoting, for example, LGBT and so on, are not used for dialogue, but just for propaganda. So if somebody, yes, can, like Jordan Peterson was using, or some other authors, can appear on a public scene with arguments that are quite that can be understood by the general public, then it is okay. But my question here is, if generally the part of the propaganda that you have been speaking about is that there is no such a thing as a woman, how comes there is such a thing as a man, or a man does not exist? If man does not exist, there is no enemy, there is no a target, there is no somebody oppressing. Who is oppressing these people if the man is not existing? So, no, but if there is everybody's social construct, who is the oppressor? I mean, the oppressor is non-existing. So basically, there is no oppression logically deducing the stuff. And secondly, you mentioned the case with the deaf children.
Candice McCulloch is the name of who.
So, if I understood you well, I don't. They are not treating or curing these children, or they are treating them, because they're saying this is just alternative type of existence. Does this mean, for example, that they should not be treated in any way because they are deaf, or if somebody is blind, you should not help him because he's blind, or somebody is paraplegic? It's an alternative way of style, and nobody should use wheelchairs and so on, help this person, not to offend this person, because it's just alternative way of existence.
Yeah, sorry, it's exactly what is happening. We had a seminar recently about the book Cynical Theories, in which we translated that. You didn't read the book, which is exactly, he briefly mentioned abilism, as they call it, abilism, and the theories of how the obesity theories now, in which both of that, this is the last peak of this madness, exactly is that it's just construction, it's normal, and that it's not true that obese people have health problems. They will give you special doctors that will take care about you and not tell you that you are fat and that you will have the problem with diabetes.
They call it medicalization.
Medicalization and so on. So this is...
How?
Why are they giving you still the medical?
They won't.
No, they're giving them. The big pharmacies produce medical.
No, they reject it. I mean, in the obesity case. So the theory is about that it shouldn't be treated because it's just a normal alternative way of life, even if it causes.
So they will give you pills for other stuff, but they will tell you that it's absolutely normal not to, see your obesity as a problem or your deafness as a problem. There are even the cases of the scholars defending that they would be accepted as, I don't know, what were the cases of autistic. The woman says, I will be autistic as a part of solidarity, and everybody has to treat me, although it's completely sane person. I mean, sane, normal person. But so this, what he's speaking about, is really, and these are academic theories nowadays.
Insane, but you would imagine, okay, that won't come across somebody's mind, but it comes and they establish it.
Yeah. But just two more things shortly. Why does nobody, for example, ask, isn't then that, for example, those persons who hold these teachings and who hold the chairs are just social? So why does nobody engaging in this let's say, exchange of opinions with people upholding these beliefs? That also the position of university professor or a teacher is just a construct, social construct, and therefore nobody should listen to them because they are just constructs and not and nothing more. And finally, methodologically speaking, this referring to the previous the colleague that asked the previous question. Methodologically looking, we cannot put just one example. And to generalize it, like with the question of this woman who praised the Lord for her son to be a girl, so because I mean it cannot be just one case saying that the conservatives are actually lying with this ideology. Okay, thank you.
Actually, there are arguments about that. So what you said jokingly that they are just social contracts, we should ignore them. So there is this kind of liner arguments. For example, the cynical theories exposes this kind of problems with the arguments that they are self-contradictory in many ways. You were referring to that sometimes they said the problem is the aggressiveness of man, but after that they say that everything is a social construction, so the aggressiveness of man is social construct too. So there are many contradictions inside the theory, which you can expose. They won't hear it. My personal experience is that many times we try to, some of my friends or I don't know, media outlets or clubs try to organize debates at Hungary. One of the leaders of the LGBTQ movement engaged in debates. He's a gay man. He's not transgender, although he is on the most extreme side of ideologically on the movement. Feminists were able to come to debate, so they were willing to debate. But from the CEU, the Soros University, the Central European University, those who were representatives of the extreme gender theory of transgenderism, they anytime somebody tried to invite them to a debate, they rejected, saying this is a classic statement of them that you cannot criticize my existence because it's dehumanizing. If you call into question that I am transgender, you are dehumanizing me because you say I don't exist, which is a manipulation of argument. Because I used to say that for Christians that we are created by God it's just as important as, for example, this kind of thing to transgenders. But it does not mean that when we say that you have to respect our theories, or our theology and others, it does not mean that you have to forcefully accept that. Because what they say is like, okay, you accept me as a human only if you buy all of my theology. That's what they do, although they do it with their anthropology. And there is no. We say that okay, accept that you think that, but just I don't want to buy it. But they say that you have to buy it. because and my argument, what you said, that we should call them just social constructs, I write down in the book that if you think that we are not just created by the language, you can criticize the others because because it's not just language. But if you think that yourself is just a construction of language, if somebody criticizes you, you will be deconstructed. Of course, it's just a symbol. I don't think it's true in that way, but their thinking is that I was created by words. By words, I am deconstructed. This is the consequence of the deconstructivist theory. And I think that's when their ideological, how is it called in America, snowflake generation. Their snowflake-lessness comes from that philosophical consideration, although many of them don't think over it. That if you are created by language, you can be deconstructed by language. Of course, I don't think that anybody is created by language, but so we have this kind of experience at Hungary that the moderate and, let's say, more conservative part of the movement, like gays and radical feminists, are willing to debate. The transgender part, or who are not transgender but they agree with the transgenders, they don't debate any time. So it's like even in leftist media outlets where I sometimes invited. So and we constantly try to organize some, but.
Thank you. Radi, okay. So thank you for your lecture. I'm sad that I missed the first part because of the bus, but I was wondering if in that part you spoke more about the epistemology of your argumentation, because I would perhaps need a bit more clarification on what is accepted as normal. Now, I agree that empirically we can prove two sexes, just as we can prove gravity empirically, and I believe honestly that it's ridiculous to discuss biological sex or gravity for that sake. But then again, I wouldn't just call this that there's men and women in the cultural sense, because across cultures we can see that there is different interpretation of what it means to be, once it is accepted that biologically some people are born as men and female, there's a lot of diversity in how this is interpreted and what this means culturally and essentially politically. So I would give that part of the argument to the social constructivist or the postmodernist or the feminist, that it is not only biological sex. There is importance in how we treat the sex. Then again, they go another step further that I don't agree with, that everything is about how we treat sex, and that then they infer that anybody can be what they want to be. I wouldn't go as far, but I just wouldn't discount that part of the argument. And to be a bit provocative, this just came to my mind while listening to the lecture. I mean, when we talk about this, I always like to talk in like what can be empirically proven. But unfortunately, this debate today, in a wider sense, is about emotions, just like any debate. I mean, political or any things. And this is why there's so much disagreement, because we're not talking. The two opposite poles are usually not discussing the issue. They're just yelling their convictions at the other. And I believe there is a lot of common ground that could be discussed, and in an academic and a civil way. But unfortunately, the zeitgeist of our time is emotion and not rationale, right? And then just to be provocative, it's funny that this happens in the Christian cultures, where you could kind of derive the empathy of Christianity as the fundament for accepting everyone. And then from this acceptance, this grows to acceptance of, evolves into acceptance of everyone and everything. And I mean, why don't you have this debate in the Muslim world? Because there's no empathy as a cultural backbone of at least this is like to be a bit provocative.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, how would you comment on like the metaphysics of a Christian acceptance kind of paving the way for, you know, this social phenomenon? Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I treat the epistemology of sex in the book. I don't know exactly. I treat on the way you refer to, but I accept that it's partly social construction, less historical development and nothing else, which does not mean that it's not just biology, but here the sex roles or the gender. So in Hungarian, gender is translated to social sex, something like this. The old school Hungarian name for that is sex role. So I say that they are partly originate in biology because it's partly, but it's not. It's a kind of lawness or how to say social science that it's not a hard law, but there are tendencies and there are exceptions in cases something like this. So not everybody has to be the same, but there are kind of aspects more for the women, more for the men, which usually and on the big, that's the law, that's the rule, which does not mean there are no exceptions and everybody is a little bit different, but they are not totally. So they originate in biology somehow, even if there are historical problems also. It's a very complex stuff. I don't. So I treat them on a little bit, but not on a cultural level everywhere because I didn't have the place in the stuff. The emotions, it's what you say about Christianity. We face at Hungary with this kind of arguments. I know the youth organizations of the Catholic Church and everywhere. You especially in the rich neighborhoods of Budapest. Who tend to don't know where they are in ideologically. They use the argument that okay, God loves everybody and something like this, and this, we can see it's a weakness of Christianity, or not the Christianity, weakness of the recent Christians to argue on that way, because this argument not supposed to be ideological. I mean Christianity every time said that we are sinners. We should be newborn, something like this. It does not a license to be, I don't know, all different from creation. Although you can, and the other thing I used to say when everybody calls for tolerance and to God loves that understanding is not the same as agreeing, because at Hungary, the leading figures of LGBTQ movement, I don't think consciously, but they don't differentiate the two. And if I say in their face that I understand you and I respect your position, but I don't agree with you, and it's not the same as, and I tolerate you, but the tolerance is not the same as agreeing, and understanding is not the same as agreeing. They are like, okay, but it's some kind of basic thing. Just now, you have to remember the people. But this problem about emotions in Christianity, it clearly exists, and I think it's a very, there's a narrow way inside. I used to say for those people that okay, but Christianity has other teachings also besides love. So and the love of Christianity is not only the emotional love. It's they say that you have to love people on the right way. You have to remember them if they do something wrong, because it leads on so sometimes love can be harsh, and there are different concepts of love. T.S. Eliot or C.S. Lewis has the the book on four types of love, something like this. It's very good on that. So, the Greek has different names for that. Hungarian is not, nor English, I guess. But it's a completely good point of view. Yeah, thank you.
So we have question or two questions by our colleague Maria Marsenic. The first question is, how do you see the current challenges for women's rights movements and their potential future? And the second question is, what is the situation in schools and universities in Hungary? Are professors required to adhere to political correctness in order to protect themselves? Are they facing the so-called microaggressions and the rise of identity politics?
By the way, that's our young colleague doing PhD on cancel culture, actually. So it's you're being exploited as a part of research. Just I'm joking a little bit. Thanks to Maria, and please.
Good luck. I tend to be agree with some parts of the feminist movement. I mean the old school feminists. So there are, not systematically, but there are some practical points when I think conservatives agree with some old school feminists, and that's totally true. Just they throw away the children with the water, as we say at Hungary. But and the human rights question, it's also true. So. But we see that although it's conservative women rights or liberal women rights argument, that the transgender movement is eradicating it. That's clear because if a man can call himself a woman, it means that he can go into the toilet. The transgender movement will say that, okay, there are no cases of harassment of women by transgender people at the toilet, but the empirical studies are more and more on it, and they show that there is. So, especially in prisons, for example. So this kind of argument is, it will be demolished soon, I guess, when more and more cases will be. But it's also true, just to refer to the first questions, that the transgender movement is eradicating the history of the LGBT movement. Like they rewrite lesbian feminists as trans and something like this. Yeah, completely. Which although I don't agree with lesbians, but I don't want to force them by force to live somewhere else. As a Christian, I can tell them that I think that's wrong or that's wrong. But if they decide being on the wrong way from Christian perspective, it's their decision. They have right. They have freedom for that. But the transgender movement says that they don't have freedom for that, as far as I see. So that's and there are some common grounds for different people. I mean, radical feminist conservatives, the old school part of the gay movement, maybe. So in some topics they can work together, I guess. I don't think it can be a big coalition, but in a practical way, in many topics, they can work together, especially in the face of transgender movement. And I think that if there is a prospect in the future, is that the anger of the fathers who have daughters, it can be very harsh, let's say, and I think that will be sometimes in the future that of the transgender movement, which went through the society very easily. It's very surprising that how it happened. Regarding Hungarian universities, we are in a much better situation than America. But the social science departments of the Hungarian universities are usually really left-wing, and they are catching up all the time the newest fashions from the West, although they are not so dominating as in America, especially at the Catholic University. Of course, it's not really liked, although I wouldn't say that at the Catholic University every sociologist is it's conservative, because not, or the psychologists. But it never that exists, and it's what is interesting. It's the newest generation in their 20s who are doing PhD and others. They are really are woke and everything else. So we are not immune, although I think our luck is that we see the future in America and in the West, and we have a little bit more time to be more consciously building resistance or the other cycles of because if they have their own cycles in the democratic society, okay, but we have to ensure that we also have their own. So it's important, but the danger is there, and I know some universities which asking you that if you go there that okay, you have to, as a foreign student, you have to answer the question that you are male, female, or something else. It's very new at Hungary, but so we are all unfortunately catching up the Western fashions. I used to say to leftist politicians at Hungary that we see that the transgender movements, especially, and the radical part of that, it will be over in a few years maybe because of this human right. I hope so, or if it's not few years, but in 2 decades, for example. So wouldn't you pass this step and just go back to the old school feminist ways even? So you don't have to buy every bullshit from Western. Please step only that this one. It would be better for us. They don't buy my argument.
Very, very briefly, thank you. I just wanted to say that the social construction story is just an invention of something that exists always. It's just the customs and tradition of different societies. So basically, you're saying, oh, this is a social construction because the societies have different customs and had different customs. So, or if you the people who are judging the social construction should be against existence of tribes and so-called primitive societies and should call for the liquidation of them because they are living in social constructed patterns of social behavior and so on. And secondly, to the question of how comes this issue arise in societies that were Christian or are Christian, let's say, have Christian background, I will just mention here one short story from Russia. New Orthodox Christian priest is coming to the parish in some part of Central Asia under the Russian Empire. And there is a local Hoja, or the Muslim priest, and he's saying, listen, you are saying that your religion is true. I am for 20 years here, and you're the 5th priest who is coming in this same period. So how comes you always have a problem and you're claiming that your religion is true? And the Christian priest answered him after drinking tea, well, listen, the Satan is not dealing with his own.
And anyway, you mentioned previously that a problem of social construction that how it will be that the males are aggressive, something like this. That yes, I address a fundamental question of social construction in the book on the way that if everything is social construction and the personality of people, including sex and identity and everything, is created by structures, the mythic structures which I cannot locate anywhere. So I don't know what kind of structures they are. But what was the force which had the interest to make social constructed men to be dominating, something like this? So at the origin of the theory, there is a problem that how this kind of patriarchy came into existence and why the impersonal structure had this interest to do that, or because they say that we basically don't have freedom because we are just social structures of intersections of I don't know what kind of things, and which means that we basically don't have freedom. Because if the structure does not have the interest to create freedom for the agents, we won't have freedom for. So one of my professors argues that if there is freedom, of human people, and we normatively can argue for freedom, it means that there should be a part of the people's personality which is not social construction, and that's precisely what the soul, for example. So it's like a self-defeating argument if you say that everything is social construction. If you say that there are social constructions but not everything is that, I think it's okay. But in this case, the argument is not a lion. So you just made it not so be a big force.
Okay, now it's almost 2 hours, actually de facto 2 hours since we started. And I would slowly finish by, in a way, mapping some of the things that we might be focusing tomorrow. Mostly, God bless me, I'm joking a little bit. Thank you very much. So speaking about the practical issues that you are opening, and that are really standing in front of us. And just let me mention, I think I have 3 groups then that might be interesting. First, what is happening is really one of the things is how the societies and the legal systems try to defend themselves from this one. You have, Eastern European countries, which are, I wrote in my last book, let me do some small self-propagation, the last book that is called Destruction and Resistance, and why Eastern Europe is more resilient, we yesterday spoke, than the Western Europe. So speaking about the Istanbul Convention, you could see that in Eastern Europe there is almost no country in which they passed without the problems. Still, 7 countries didn't ratify, including Hungary. Turkey was the first one to get out of that 2 years ago, and so on and so on. But also is interesting what is happening in the Western countries. I'm referring to the last law of the Germany. Maybe you're familiar here with that Germany recently passed the law according to which person can go to the, how we call that, Matična, civil registry, thank you very much, registry office, and it can just, that's very important, without any medical surgery or hormone treatment, say that he wants to be whatever. And
psychological.
Yeah, in a way, but I think that it will even be, erased. My point is actually, I think this is very wise movement, whatever one might say, that, okay, if you want to play your fashionable game, go and do that, but without, this is the biggest problem, ruining the kids and the people by putting hormones, blockators, doing the magical change of sex and so on. This is very, very interesting move, which I think is, in a way, very, very clever one. And also, we also saw that the British, apart from this case with the Tavistock Clinic, that doesn't mean that the whole Tavistock is abolished. Of course, it will survive in many ways, but the clinic is abolished, and they also introduced the ban on a transgender person for participating in the women's sports activities, for example, swimming and especially fighting and so on, which is really fantastic and important thing, because we already had the cases in which, transgender person has really, almost killed women in several, and of course, women cannot compete in athleticism or swimming with person who is de facto male. So this is one thing how we are, defending ourselves in the East and in the West. Tomorrow, I think we might be speaking about that. Another issue is, Jovica started the issue about the emotionalism, but the point is actually that the guys who are pushing this one, and these are big companies, big tech companies, Palo Alto, foundations, you could really precisely see what are the origins of that. are doing that in a totalitarian way. I mean, why it's emotional, let me say, conservative our side? Because this is really becoming very dangerous. People are deeply in danger. And just let me illustrate the fantastic case and horrible with whom Gregory is opening his book. And this is this story about Robert Hoogland. And just briefly, we don't have time, it was the case about his 14-year-old daughter in Canada, which he addressed as a daughter. And school and the whole system, starting from the school up to judiciary, came out against him, taking that child, which is like 13, 14 years old, and which was exposed to transgender propaganda and then started to think about differently. So they did a bunch of the moves that were against him. They also started to treat her in the school as a transgender person and not disclosing to parents what they've been doing. Which is happening now in the USA as a custom. They are getting the order not to tell the parents ahead because they would prevent them and so on. And they went to the court, as Gregory said, and judge said that de facto parents don't have the rights, and that school, society, whatever, has more rights than that parents do not have any rights, and that this is hate speech, that he is addressing his child as a daughter, and that he could go to prison. So we are speaking about totalitarianism, which is already existing in the academic sphere. And by the way, Judith Butler is the honorary PhD holder or doctorate of Belgrade University here and so on. So just let me quote what you put in the book.
And her field is literature theory.
Of course, you know,
and he's philosophizing on nature, on hard science,
sexualism, on biology, and so it's horrible. So, what when speaking about totalitarianism, look at the case. Actually, the guy who said, I'm quoting from the book, "Here I am sitting there as a parent, watching a perfectly healthy child be destroyed, and there is nothing I can do but sit on the sideline, according to Justice Boden. At the time, I can only affirm or get thrown in the jail." So he is forced to accept that and not to do anything. And he knows that, after 10 years, maybe she will probably go back to, that transitioning. But at that time, she will not be able to have the kids, to have the family and everything, which is happening more and more. I mean, the problem is really totalitarianism and the way, actually, as you put queering or everything, that queer is directly also against the lesbian and classical, let me say, gay people. No, identity is not. We should be all changing our identities, traveling, floating, and so on. And the third part, and I'm finishing with that, is the final consequence of this agenda. You rightly showed, actually, that immediately in 2015, after Obergefell has been passed, the case there with introducing obligatory acceptance of gay marriages in the whole America, they started with polyamory as another. So there is clear agenda. And after that is total destruction of civilization, returning people to the animals, really. And it's really open, because the next thing that we have there, it's very obvious, is pedophilia and incest, which are standing at the same agenda. And already you could see, I mean, Andrea Dworkin has been writing upon that already in the 70s, that also incest is construction only. And already you have several cases in several, you mentioned also in the book that there are from 2021, the cases, incest is, absolutely acceptable. It's construction if people accept to do that and so on, and pedophilia as well. That, of course, NAMBLA and many other associations, and of course polyamory. Just to tell where we are, APA, or APA, American Psychological Association, from 2018 has the working group within itself that is being discussing, status of polyamory. with very clear idea that they will soon define that as unacceptable. And I heard that already South Africa as a state is introducing some parts that will decriminalize, big polygamy and de facto legalize open marriages and so on and so on. So my point is actually that with this third thing, I think that it's about time that we, stand up and say it's about time that we have to, use all the possible means to defend the civilization, because the practical consequence is disappearance of the civilization in many ways. So if you want to comment a bit, or maybe we could continue tomorrow.
I don't have more comments, but we can go on tomorrow. Yeah, the incest is clearly on the agenda. I quote some examples about that. In America, it's usually parent and his daughter or boy who he didn't see for ages. I don't know. So it wasn't he who grown up the child, but they meet when the child grows up, and the parent suddenly feels love to his child, and then they register the stuff and something like this. And there's a movement for that, so it's not just a theoretical consideration, but there are practical examples. For that, polyamory is clearly on the books, although until some people live together and they don't want to register it, nobody will, of course, step in. But I guess they want to register it. I don't know how it goes because polyamory is, I cite some theorists of polyamory who are a little bit skeptical about their own convictions, because they say that it's practically, it usually don't work with more than 3 people, and even with 3 people it's very laborious. You don't have time, the same time for more person, and it's fluid, so one person is every time feels a little bit less neglected, and it changes. So it's like in practice it does not work on the rosy way they say, but it's on the agenda. And the pedophilia is very interesting because I think pedophilia won't be on the agenda because of the social resistance, but there were many efforts to put in, and I quote the example of the NAMBLA, North American boy, who were part of the international movement, and the United States, the United Nations refused the consultative status of ILGA, which is another one big international LGBT organizations, because NAMBLA was part of that. So NAMBLA, which went for homosexual pedophilia, they defended that in the 90s and later. And after more than 10 years, the debate ended on the way that ILGA exposed the NAMBLA, and after that the UN accepted as a consultative institution the ILGA, but the pedophiles were already in the movement, and they theorized about these kind of things in serious journals from serious professional positions, for example, from universities of Netherlands, something like this. I guess in practice it's now it's over, because they realize that they will never made society accept pedophilia. But another way, it's on the theoretically there is, of course, it's maybe in the background, it's on the way, and what Hungary, I see that there are many cases of pedophilia. So it was many years ago when I heard the last news about the pedophilia, when the people involved were different sex. It's a man abusing a boy, and I don't remember a case when a man abused a girl. Clearly, maybe there are, but most of the cases in the news are men abusing a boy, and even not a woman abusing a girl. So it's in lesbian form, it doesn't exist. So I don't know. It's mostly ignorable. I don't know. But at Hungary, even there was a movie about a case about the 90s when a famous secondary school teacher organized famous camps for elite families' children, and after 10 years, it turned out that he abused the boys, and there was a big outrage, and they made even a movie about that. But there was one aspect nobody mentioned in the debate, that it was gay pedophilia. Every time they ignored that part of the stuff, and they ignore just to open. But I will finish here. They really like to speak about the pedophile priests in the Catholic Church, and what they will never admit that most of the cases it's homosexuality. So usually they abuse a boy. So and they don't want to touch that aspect somehow.
Just one fact, we would slightly disagree, just to open for the future, about the, as you say, giving up from pedophilia. I think that it's going reverse in the sense that,
Maybe.
Sexual education that's been constantly pushed everywhere and been permanently pushed to smaller and smaller kids. I gave an example in Italy recently, a friend of mine, his daughter was exposed.
They say they can consent.
In a sense, no, it's sexualization of the children from the early age. They are pushing that already from, in the sense that the argument goes that, well, the things have changed. They are growing, more mature earlier than it was in the old times. So now already at 10 years, we should speak to kids about the sexuality. They should be prepared and so on. What they are de facto doing is that they are, doing propaganda on sexualization of the kids, which should be, avoided from that and so on. Also, they use that on a pretext that they should know that to protect themselves, blah, blah, blah. But de facto, it happened that recently, I can give you this example in, I think, Padova. There was they don't call it sexual education, they call it general education for tolerance, of course, and so on, but they exposed the kids from the 11 years to the classical porn, you should be aware of those things and so on. But anyway, we'll continue tomorrow about that. Thank you very much, Gergely. I think it was worth of coming and listening to this. Book is really opening 10 times more of those things and offering many of those things you issued. Fantastic bibliography at the end, a lot of pages of the recent literature that you can use that. It's really very, very fantastic achievement. So thanks again for being with us. And tomorrow we continue in a little bit more form, but we already opened. Of course, I invite everybody to join us tomorrow. And it will be down there at room 105 at the 3rd floor, but also other people that may come and share with us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us, and please continue to bring these contacts with people from North Macedonia, and we are, in a way, I can say, sharing this and making some alliance, at least for research. I would also add for preventing of the big problems that we might be have in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your coming. I am very pleased that you were interested in, and I am also curious about your insights, and tomorrow at any time we can discuss.
Thank you very much.